Welcome to the HMO Property Show. By investors, for investors. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a new landlord, or just curious about property investing, this is the podcast for you. Sponsored by the Co-Living Collective, your trusted partner in creating vibrant and sustainable shared living experiences. Visit us at colivingcollective.com.au to learn more.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gibb, and it is an absolute pleasure to introduce a repeat guest, Mr. Mike McGowan from the HIA. Michael, welcome back.
Thanks, Neil. Always great to be welcomed back. It means maybe we said something great the first time, and hopefully we can repeat the dose today.
I listened to our last podcast this morning when I was out having a walk, and it was recorded in April 2023, so 2.5 years ago. And it was interesting to hear some of the things that we were discussing on the podcast, which were concerns at the time. Some of them might still be relevant now. Some of them might have disappeared as well. So I think we'll recap a little bit on some of the things we said there.
Yep.
And then we'll get into what's happening nowadays in the building industry as well. So since 2023, though, has anything else happened with you? Any major changes, any more kids or anything like that?
Obviously, the building industry has been pretty busy. I've got two girls who are 10 and 12 now, and definitely no plans for any further ones, but also taken on a role with the housing industry forecasting group for the government. That pulls together a lot of the peak bodies to talk about what the future outlook of the housing industry is, and try and put some predictions on what the numbers might look like over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
And then that's a document that some of the government departments can utilise to help with some of their planning on what the housing outlook, demand and potential forecast looks like coming into the next few years.
Beautiful. I guess that ties in nicely with the role at the HIA as well.
Yeah, definitely. We sit on that to provide our perspective. You know, we do a lot of work in the detached housing space, but obviously moving into medium density and some of those projects as well. So, definitely blends in well with my day job as the executive director, and obviously working with a lot of our members on how we increase supply and affordability for housing in WA.
Question on everybody's lips, right?
It is, yeah.
How do we get more housing in the ground, finished for people to live in, which is why we're recording the podcast today. And when we recorded it back in 2023, we were speaking about the wombat and the snake, which was the kind of slow-moving trade base that was going through the industry, and everybody was kind of bottlenecked at the same position. It was first we were all waiting for bricklayers, then we were all waiting for roof carpenters, and then the fixing trades. What's happening nowadays in the industry? Are we still seeing any constraints like that, or is it different?
It's definitely a different environment to what we saw 2 or 3 years ago, which I think all the builders are pretty thankful for. When we caught up, there was trade issues, there was material supply challenges, there seemed to be shipping issues, and everything was happening all at the same time. As you said, we were trying to push a whole lot of work that had been generated through the COVID period through a really tiny funnel, or the wombat and the snake, and that was just backing up projects and causing long delays, and ultimately led to a really poor customer experience, but also a lot of builders that didn't make it through, either through insolvencies or just decided that they'd had enough and moved out of the industry. So thankful at the moment that pressure is eased and that intensity has probably subsided a little bit. And I think the builders are really conscious of what that consumer experience is like. And it's almost not quite a manufacturing process, but they're really conscious of the volume that they're taking on, and then what the capacity is of the industry to deliver that. So, as I'm a builder, I know I can sell 20 this month. In 6 months, once I get through all the planning process, I can lay those 20 slabs, and I know there's enough concrete capacity to do that. And then, whether I'm building out a brick, stick or tin, it may sort of kind of fluctuate from there. The flow-on effect from that is obviously we've seen a bit of a reduction in build times. I would say your standard sort of 3x2, 4x2 greenfields product is coming out in sort of 10 to 12 months on average.
Still not incredible, is it? But
it's not incredible. I built pre-COVID and it was probably closer to 6 or 7, considering we were probably in the 8s to 24s. And we'll take the wins while we can get them. And I think all the builders are aspiring now to get that number back down towards sort of 7 to 8 months. But, we're still seeing trade capacity challenges and things that are just preventing us getting there at this time.
great capacity due to the lack of housing.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen a massive growth in apprentices, which is fantastic because that's our homegrown workforce. Yeah. We want to see more interstate and international trades coming into Western Australia, but we do run into the problem of, well, where are they going to stay when they get here? We've seen probably 1,500 to 2,000 workers coming in through some of the state-run migration programs. A lot of those coming from, say, the UK, the Philippines, and a good chunk coming from the East Coast and New Zealand as well. So they're sustainable numbers. They're probably numbers that don't put extreme pressure on the housing system as it is at the moment because they can co-live. And, a lot of the people that are coming in are single young people from the East Coast who are qualified in their trade and they're looking for something different. So they don't necessarily need a whole house. So we're seeing growth, but I guess if we're talking about numbers, we're building 20,000 dwellings a year at the moment. We probably need to get that up towards 25 to kind of meet demand, and then be able to do that sustainably, which is the trick at the moment.
Yeah. On the last podcast we did as well, we spoke about pre-COVID capacity, and we were building anywhere between 10 and 12,000 houses because there was no demand.
Yeah.
And then literally overnight we went from that 20-odd thousand, which then, like you said, it's unfortunately for some of these building companies that are out there, it's either forced them to close the doors or they've just had enough and they've closed the doors and walk away anyway, which is a shame because I know some of these people that unfortunately didn't make it through, and they're good people that are just having a crack, trying to have a better life and trying to deliver housing for people. But unfortunately, it's been incredibly challenging, and it's been challenging for everyone. The consumer, like you say, the experience hasn't been the best for them, which has caused a lot of frustration from the builder side of things as well. Unfortunately, some of them have gone out of business. So how are builders feeling about the market conditions now? Are they feeling positive? Are they still feeling a little bit pessimistic? Is there any sort of...
Yeah, I think they're feeling a lot more positive in the current market. And I think that's because, as I said before, the volume's kind of matched and realigned itself to what the capacity of the industry is. The challenges are known. So we know that there's might be bricklayer capacity, or we know that there's challenges in trades in particular areas, and we can plan around those a little bit better. And we can kind of set the expectations for the customers of what they may be as we're entering into the contract. Demand for housing is incredibly strong. We've seen, just when we think things are going to plateau a little bit, we see it go again. So from a builder's perspective, I think they're really comfortable with kind of where their processes are at. I think it is unfortunate, as you say, that we lost a number of builders through the last 4 or 5 years. And as you said, each building experience is different, and they may have gone insolvent for a variety of number of reasons, and they all just get lumped into the one basket. And I think there's definitely some really good people in our industry that are no longer running building companies. They may have fallen back into running and supervising and getting back onto the tools or something like that. But I think that the general sentiment around the building community now is that there's some momentum. I've been using the word cadence because it is predictable and there's method to the madness. And I think ultimately we're seeing some more positive commentary on some of the social media channels that we see, and people getting their keys to their new homes in a much more reasonable time frame.
Excellent. And is the industry in a whole, is the streamlined pipeline, is it clunky? Are we seeing a lot of action at the front end because there was a gap when people didn't build to then get the confidence to start building again? What's that looking like?
No, I think it's definitely more streamlined, and I think what we're probably seeing now is every 6 months or so, it feels like there's capacity in the industry that grows. So you can't, because it takes 12 months to build a house, you take on that extra capacity and it puts some increased pressure on the bricklayers, but you can't go and get up 500 more carpenters because the work won't be ready for them there yet. So it's a bit of a gradual process at the moment, and every 6 months I think we'd probably increase by about 10%. And when that pressure comes on that particular trade, then they'll skill up and they'll maybe bring on some apprentices and go and bring on some international workers or something like that to help them get through that volume. And obviously that goes through its stages. So you might be concreting first, then into bricklayers, and then once the roof's on, things seem to move a little bit smoother from there. But it's definitely a lot more streamlined at the moment that we were seeing, and that push to try and get everything through a pinhole is not there, which I think is great.
And it's great to hear that there's more apprenticeships happening in the industry as well. It's good that the younger generation are getting involved now, and at some stage all of these mature trades are going to retire, and we need to make sure we've got a succession plan coming through as well. But also the fact that they're already in the state, in this country and in Western Australia means that they don't need housing as well. So it's not like we're bringing people in and taking up housing for other trades that can come in as well, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a really interesting time because we're having lots of conversations around our rec and board tables at the moment about, what the future of the industry looks like. And, for young people coming through, what does their future look like? And, what are the impacts that AI are going to have on some of the accounting roles and some of those traditional commerce type roles that people tended to go into out of uni. And, it's probably going to be a little bit harder in the foreseeable future for AI to have the same impact on the trade base. So we are seeing, and probably there's more tech involved in the building industry now than people give it credit for as well. So we're certainly seeing, we've had about 40,000 people start an apprenticeship in the construction industry over the last 4 years, which is great.
Wow. Is that across the country?
Wow,
okay.
So that's across commercial building, mining and resi construction. There's 40,000. We generally get about 60% of those get through their apprenticeship and qualified. So we need to keep topping that up. But I think, as you said, they're here. They can see that there's a long pipeline of work, whether it be in resi construction or some other field. And I think the interesting thing maybe in the resi construction space now as well is that the trades are getting paid a reasonable wage because the demand is there. And there's probably less of that pull to go into other industries than we've seen at the moment. So you're on a reasonably comparable wage to perhaps what someone in the mines was getting and probably what that trade was earning pre-COVID. So that leakage that we have traditionally got to the mining industry over the next little while the resi space remains incredibly strong, we're hopeful retain some of that workforce as well.
Okay. And you touch slightly on build times there as well. So we were kind of in the 14, 15, 16 month. We're bringing them back down to like the 10 to 12 month. What is causing that still delay? Like you said, pre-COVID, you were building in 6 or 7 months, which is kind of like the ideal target for a single story dwelling. What's causing that delay now? Are we still seeing supply issues? Is it just labour or is it a combination of the two?
It's probably definitely less supply issues. I think most people are saying that materials supply is pretty handy. I think the challenge is still the labour side of things and probably from a builder's point of view, almost the scheduling. So there's a number of white days still within the build cycle, which are, you traditionally pre-COVID, you might have had your concreter out, knowing that they were going to do that job, and you could book your bricklayer or your carpenter to come in and do the walls the next week. I think still within the scheduling environment, we're allowing a little bit of extra time because of that trade availability, and we don't want to miss that slot because if you miss that slot with that particular trade, you go back to the back of the queue. So I think the challenge for as that trade capacity grows is you'll see the white days within a build cycle start to come in and people be willing to kind of close that gap a little bit more, knowing that there's a pretty good chance that the concrete will be there. It's not going to rain in the next couple of days or whatever. And I know that the bricklayer or the carpenter can come in and stand the walls up in the course of the next couple of weeks. So I think that's where that increased capacity starts to reduce some of those white days and we start to get those build times back down to 7 or 8 months that we were seeing pre-COVID.
So coming back into good weather now as well.
Well, it definitely helps. Yeah, I think everyone's sick of the rain and the cold weather, and we know there's a bit of a rush through the spring and in towards Christmas. So definitely, everyone's working hard to get those build times back down to those pre-COVID levels.
Is there any particular trades that we're seeing that are being the kind of choke point in any builds right now? Is it bricklayers that we're struggling to get at the minute again, or are we okay in the bricklaying trades?
I think we would love to have more, but I think what we have seen, we might cover it off over the course of the conversation as well. We've seen people start to pivot into different build methodologies as well. So we've seen real growth in a couple of builders starting to do veneer homes as standard, and obviously more and more starting to have, I would say probably pre-COVID, builders had a plan A of how to build a house and kind of had considered what a plan B could be, but it feels like there's a plan A, B and C now for how they may build each of those homes. So definitely, as I said before, as we sell more homes, there's a bit of a capacity constraint at the front end, which is, the traditional concreting, bricklaying and carpentry teams. But I think we're starting to see more people play around with their build methodologies that's taking some of those those roadblocks out.
Are we seeing that spike with them front-end trades because we're seeing more people move from trying to buy established properties and just getting sick of getting price out of everything and just moving to new builds, and we're starting to see a spike in new builds again?
Yeah, I definitely think, obviously there was the report last week that the established housing market was at record lows. So naturally, and we all see the pictures of people lining up for either rentals or established houses and ultimately getting sick of missing out and coming back to the new home market. So that definitely plays a part. It's still some land challenges that we're having in the residential space, be that greenfield or infill, to get those projects done and delivered as quickly and as efficiently as we would like. But yeah, demand remains incredibly strong, and I think it will do for the next 4 or 5 years if things continue the way they are.
There's no light at the end of the tunnel that I can see which would indicate that things are going to slow down, unless I'm looking the wrong way.
Well, yeah, I guess selfishly from a building industry, we don't want them to slow down.
Yeah,
So, we're as an industry body, we're almost looking 2 or 3 years ahead now to see, what are the roadblocks that are going to be there. I think land and labour will continue to be the main challenges. We talk lots about regulation as well, and how do we make it easier, both from a planning or a building perspective, to get homes from paper to be built. And I think those will always be there, but I do think there's a pretty good run coming. And I think that's a good thing from an industry. I think, we have gone through probably 4 peaks and troughs over the course of the last 20 years, building 30,000 homes one year and 10,000 4 or 5 years later. And that's not great for workforce. It's not great for building companies. It's not great for manufacturers and suppliers that get efficiency out of certainty. So there is an opportunity over the next few years to make, to build houses consistently. And I think off the back of that, it generally leads to an increase in innovation and people willing to take a bit more of a risk, knowing that there's a bit of a pipeline of work coming through.
Is this problem consolidated to Western Australia? Are we seeing the same things happening in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, for instance, with inconsistency in deliverables and also trade and labour?
I think in South Australia and Queensland, I'll get them out. In South Australia and Queensland, we're probably seeing similar challenges. The country's generally oscillated on 2 different cycles. So when we're going well, the East Coast is not going particularly well, and where they're going well, we take a bit of a back seat. Obviously, during COVID, everyone went well, and we're probably falling back into those dual cycles. So certainly in Victoria and in New South Wales, they've got probably more affordability challenges. They have issues with land and getting land to market, and even getting through their council system can take 12 months from the time someone signs a piece of paper to actually when you're getting that building occurring on site. So ultimately, it is land and labour that allows you to produce things faster. And if you had 50,000 more tradies, then you would be able to produce things faster, and that would certainly be the same here as it is over on the East Coast. But I think certainly we're experiencing better challenges than they are. I think they're, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, there's just a lot of red tape and a lot of challenges there to get housing to market. As a result, a house and land package out of Sydney is $1.5 million. So then you run into the affordability challenges. I think we're almost thankful for the challenges that we have here at the moment. And certainly when I talk to some of my HOA colleagues around the country, they are envious, I guess, of the situation that we're in from an industry point of view, notwithstanding the challenges that we still need to supply more housing to the market.
It's interesting, though, because when you're knee-deep in the middle of them challenges, you don't feel grateful for them, do you?
We've had a couple of forums recently where the builders have said, I haven't got much to say, and then spoken for 10 minutes. So there's definitely challenges out there. And I think, like I said before, we're really concentrating on kind of how we unlock some of those so that the momentum continues.
Also, the government's got infill targets. They want more infill housing delivered in areas where there's already infrastructure and amenity, but feasibility numbers still aren't looking great, which is pushing us further and further to the fringes, which is creating this urban sprawl, which, yes, it's supplying more housing, but it's not particularly in the areas that we want as well, is it?
No, it's probably the easier.
I'm saying the government.
Yeah, I think it's an age-old question, and I think while the feasibility of those apartment, whether it be they, probably more affordable apartment complexes aren't stacking up at the moment, and that infill density that we're looking for, you kind of have to keep going out and producing some housing. I'd almost go far to say is that the volume of housing that we're producing at the moment in greenfield spaces is about, you wouldn't want to kind of do more. I think if we're doing 9 to sort of 12,000 greenfields dwellings a year, that feels about right. We really need to find ways of stimulating the infill market, be that easier to develop the single residential lots into townhouses, 2-3 type products, but also taking advantage of transport hubs where we can see more apartment products coming to market and providing more supply.
The idea with Metronet as well.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, there's challenges with Western Power and Watercorp being able to service some of those areas and having the capacity to be able to have those types of products available. I think we definitely would like to see more people stepping into that space and potentially more investment to be able to make that happen as well.
If we remove the kind of apartment dwellings that we need, because that's an experienced type of developer that's required to deliver a project of that scale, and we focus more on the kind of missing middle, which is your townhouses and your single and double story style housing, but not on the fringes. I'm not seeing many developers that can make them projects stack up right now, mainly because of land prices are so high, construction prices are high, but the end sale price doesn't give them the return and the feasibility that they need, which means we either need construction prices to drop or end sale prices to increase, which I can only see one of them things happening. Are we right in saying build prices will never come back down? Would they only go up from here?
I think they will stabilise at some point, and I think they've probably, from a material supply point of view, have probably got more back down towards a CPI increase that we'd traditionally expect. I think the labour price continues to be a little bit to fluctuate depending on where the demand for the particular trade is at that particular time. But you're right, I think the pressure in the established market as well is driving up just the demand for people just to have a house, and maybe making some of those development opportunities challenging for the developers in that space as well, which then further increases the established house price.
Yeah. So we need to get the end sale price up, which means affordability issues, which means we need to pay people more. That's more to build
it's
the
a
houses.
vicious cycle, isn't it? It is, yeah. And I think, the more we can, look to different methodologies and technologies to help us deliver that that housing faster, and obviously that will help reduce some of that price and maybe help that plateau. Do we need to start having real conversations about the size of our housing? That's a realistic way to reduce the cost of a house, is looking at, do we need the 4x2s? Can we diversify the product that's coming into that space? Do we need the theatre room? They're all the things that we can realistically make changes to potentially reduce some of that cost of housing. We then run into some financial challenges and maybe some valuation challenges, which is, again, this kind of vicious cycle where everything's intertwined. But I think the missing middle is going to be a really important part of Perth's development over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. And Cortality, which is the new name for RP Data, and they released a paper not too long ago called, I can't remember the name of it, but it was essentially referring to the fact that we've been building the wrong style of housing for the market needs. So we've been building 70 to 80% of 3, 4 and 5 bedroom houses, but 60 to 70% of the market are actually singles or couples, and the actual amount of single families with kids is not as big as the volume of houses that we're building for that style of the market. So we've kind of got an upside down marketplace, which leads nicely into what you were saying there. Do we need to consider building smaller houses, but then we need the planning to match the size of houses that we need to deliver in the areas that we need them, right?
Yeah, and I think, that's the challenge, because we are almost producing this product in the greenfields, because, the land sizes are down as low as 200 square metres for a piece of land. And, there's some builders coming out there with some innovative single-story or two-story product to be able to fit on that type of dwelling. So we're almost doing it on the urban fringes. It's how do we do it in the Willetons, the Belmonts, the Careens, River Vales, Dianellas, those types of areas where we do have quite large blocks that are, will support a diversity of product and are reasonably well serviced and have good amenities. So how do we unlock that, I think, is the big challenge.
Like you said there, it's not really a housing issue, it's going to be a land issue, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think my personal opinion is that we're probably in a land crisis at the moment rather than a housing crisis. I think even the volume of people that we have to build houses is probably at the same level as the amount of land that's available to build them on, both in greenfields and in infill areas. We're seeing a lot of houses being sold in greenfield areas now with 6 months waiting for titles, and then anywhere between 3 and 6 months for that site to be energised by Western Power.
Western Power is still causing some problems. I think we discussed that 2.5 years ago as well. Yeah, so they haven't fixed their issues either.
No, I think they've still got some capacity challenges that they're trying to address. But as we talked about, I don't think these problems they haven't gone away for 2.5 years, and I don't think they're going away for the next 4 to 5 years. And I think we need to, at all levels, look at some coordination of understanding where the growth's going to happen, how much resource do we need to invest to make sure that we can catch up and then get ahead of where we are, so that we can continue to build. Some of the cool stuff that's coming out in the prefab space is seeing build times come down, different types of product come to market, and I think for that to be able to get the scale that it needs, we need to make sure that we have the places to put them and not have houses sitting there waiting to be energised and not having people live in them.
You mentioned there as well some of these greenfield locations are seeing smaller blocks like 200 to 250 square metres, and you said that some builders are putting some innovative product on there as well. What sort of things are we seeing? Is it different construction methodology? Is it just the style of housing that's on there? What is it?
Yeah, both. So we're seeing a lot of people play around with steel frame and timber frame product, single story, 2-story, and at a much more affordable price point. So that product is in its early days, and I think as Perth grows out, being able to see and feel what that product really looks like will hopefully help it be adopted in some of the suburbs that we were talking about it before. But I think there's some household names that are doing some really cool product out there.
Do we know what sort of square metres them houses are in terms of internal?
Yeah, I think the 2-story product you're probably still seeing at 150 squares. So they're still decent size, yeah. And still two. Some of it's two-bedroom product, some of it's 3-bedroom product. But yeah, I think it's taking the affordability challenge head on and looking at different ways of doing things.
And in them houses, have they still got the second living space or the theatre room or anything like that? Or have you just got the bare essentials?
I think they've just got
living.
Yeah, kitchen, dining, living, and then bedrooms. So.
Because I recently went back to the UK, and I think I've just got so used to living in the houses that we live in here. Very fortunate that I live in a beautiful house, and it's probably too big for what we need. But going back to the UK and going back to the houses that I used to live in there, I was shocked at how small they actually were. But then I actually sat and thought about the fact that myself, my mother and father, my sister, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, used to come and stay over all the time. There was around 5 or 6 of us when my sister had a boyfriend too. There was sometimes 6 of us there on a weekend. Yeah, it didn't feel small. Now going back to it after feeling the size of the houses that we live in here, it felt really small. So how do we change the mindset from people that are used to living in a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom property with a games room and a theatre room? And we talk a lot about downsizing and uplifing, whatever you want to call it. But how do people change that mindset that they don't need all that? They've just got used to it. And from an affordability point, this is the way that we should be living in smaller, smarter spaces.
Yeah, I without knowing your exact circumstance, I suspect they were forced to go down that path.
Oh, yeah.
From an affordability
all the
point of
houses
view.
In the area were exactly the same.
And I suspect we're probably going to head in a similar direction. I think I can see in 10 or 15 years where, traditionally maybe you and I kind of stepped out and went and bought a house and land package on the fringes and then developed that and then came back in. Whereas, someone might have to buy a smaller apartment as their first dwelling and then, live in that for a while and maybe keep it and rent it out and then look to move more out into this established market after that. I think that's the key role that the missing middle plays, but it's going to be a hard one because we all want what someone in our network has, and you know, I totally understand that, you know, your house is, you want to be proud of your house as well.
Biggest investment you're making.
It is, absolutely, and we still see, you know, lots of people putting in theatre rooms and all those kinds of things. Yeah, absolutely. Do they, from a return on investment, do they mash up? Maybe, maybe not. I think, you know, I think affordability is just going to have to drive that change. Probably some of the building methodology changes as well. I think, you know, as we kind of see more brick veneer and framed type product, it's probably, we probably have to simplify those houses to make them affordable. So we're also seeing a bit more truss roof come into the market, and that benefits from almost a square house, and doesn't allow you to throw the bathroom out 900 and kind of cut it back in. So I think some of the changes that we'll see, people will have to make some hard decisions about the way they live. But like you said, once you're in it, I'm probably the same. But we probably, you know, when we built our house, we probably made it too big and could have done with probably 50 square metres less. But
yeah, fair enough. Sometimes in these, when we need kind of some help from somewhere, we rely on the government to bring the solution, and sometimes it works. Majority of the times it causes other problems down the line. So when we think back to the first homeowners grant that they brought out in COVID, and then the federal home builders grant that they brought out as well, this is what kickstarted a lot of the problems that we've been speaking about in today's podcast. We've also just seen that they've brought out or increased the first home guarantee from October 1st, 2025. So they're going to raise the cap from $600,000 to $850,000, which means that anybody with a 5% deposit can now afford a property that's $250,000 more expensive. Do we think that's going to cause a spike in the building industry again? Is it something we should be concerned about? What are the HIA's views on it?
Yeah, I think, so there's two parts to this, I think. We've had a system called Keystart that would be very comparable to what's been announced.
Keystart's still out now?
Yeah. And I would say they've recently changed some of their settings as well to be pretty much on par with what's been announced from the federal government. I think probably on the East Coast, where they are struggling from a demand point of view, this stimulates a little bit of demand that they would be seeking to come into the market. I also think it acknowledges that, you know, you're probably looking anywhere between $650 and $800 for a house now. So to save up a 20% deposit while renting in a really challenging market is incredibly difficult. And we've seen a lot of people go to the bank of mum and dad to be able to avoid paying that mortgage lender's insurance in the current environment. So you throw on build costs that have doubled. Obviously, the interest rates have increased as well. So I think from a realistic point of view, it's a good measure to be able to allow people to access the market. In Western Australia, I don't think we're going to see a massive influx that's going to cook the market like we've seen in other parts. So I think that's partly driven by the fact that we have had Keystart, so it's allowed some flexibility there. But I also think the builders are really conscious of what the demand is and what the capacity of the industry is to deliver. And as we touched on a couple of times, our land supply just won't allow us to build more homes because, you know, we're working on projects that are sort of 12 to 18 months out. I think it's a good thing because too often we develop policy when it's almost too late and we rush it, and it causes some of these kinds of things. Whereas a policy like this will be handy for in 5 or 10 years when our market kind of cools off a little bit, that it will allow people to access and maintain a steady building level, perhaps that we've missed in the past, which was, you know, we don't like to look back, but when we look at that 2015 mark where we were building 30,000 homes, to get to 10,000 in 2019 was just a disaster. So, you know, things like this that would have kind of stimulated some demand in 2017 and kept it at, you know, 15 to 20 would have been really vital through that period.
Yeah, I think aside from the building industry as well, I think it's really going to stimulate them low price point suburbs again, which is what we've seen a big kind of run in.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. It feels like yesterday, but it was literally like 24 months ago, wasn't it, when we've seen the likes of Mandurah, Rockingham, Armadale, Gosnells.
Yeah.
a really big push where property prices have doubled in some of them suburbs.
It will increase property prices because you're probably more in the established market where you are providing access to a whole group of people that didn't have access to the market already. So it definitely will increase the established house price. So that'll be a challenge to manage.
We've got 1,900 houses for sale on the market. Still seeing record transactions of like 800-900 a week, which could then potentially push more people into the new builds ecosystem, again, because they're getting priced out the market, sick of getting beaten on prices from other people. Who knows?
It's a challenge, and I think, obviously we'll wait and see, but I think if there is a good thing from the established house price goes up, it does mean that gap to make some of those medium density and high density projects feasible, it allows them to come to market. And I think there's a stat at the moment that only 20% of the approved apartments are actually start commencement of construction, and it's less than 1,500 over the course of the next 12 months. So getting more of that product to market is going to be really important. Yeah. And if this offsets some of that, then I think that may be slightly beneficial.
Less than 1,500 apartments that are going to get delivered in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we need a lot more than that, right? Wow, okay. If you could sit in the room with the Premier today, what is the one policy change that you'd ask for?
You're being harsh, only allowing me to have one, but
I'll give you three.
But I think certainly we've touched on it a little bit from a land point of view, we need to find ways to bring infield land to market and serviced, and from a greenfield space, we need to, we want to have that conversation of the federal government, whether you like it or not, has set a target of 1.2 million homes. For WA, that's one. We're a year into it. We've built 20,000. Where are we going to build the next 100? I don't think we've got a really good picture of where that is. Let's pull everyone together and start to identify where it is and what resources we need to make that happen. And then the other part is just around some certainty. Continuing to put investment into our apprenticeships and trades. The government's got some great subsidies at the moment on skilled migration. So they've got $10,000 for a business to help bring someone in from overseas. And we've seen builders and trades start to take that up, which has been really beneficial. But then things like the National Construction Code, we can probably pause that for a little while we get a little bit of consistency. And then how do we look at some of the planning schemes that are out there and continue to make it easier to provide development into some of the areas that we've talked about. So whether that's introduction of AI systems to help streamline some of the process and take it out of what can be a subjective process to being a really streamlined process that's looking at the map of the building, the fabric of the building and approving or denying based on that rather than anything else. So I think they're the kinds of things that provide certainty. And if you get certainty, then you get some of the companies that we're seeing come into Perth that are looking to build modular, build prefab, steel trusses, offsite are doing some great work out in that space as well. So, and then once you can get some momentum through there, we start to make a bit of a dent in the challenge that we've got.
Yeah, definitely. Let's finish on this, Michael. If we look ahead 5 years from now, I think you mentioned earlier, HI do a lot of forecasting in the future. 5 years from now, what does the building industry look like and what does the housing market look like?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's going to be as tight as it is at the moment, hopefully. I think we are going to go through a period of change. We probably see 75% of product in WA double brick at the moment, 25% being alternative methods. That maybe flips on its head. So we start to see some changes in that space. I would like to see us building a lot more, not massive apartments, but I think there's kind of the transport nodes that have been established around Metronet that we can take advantage of. There's some driving down Canning Highway today around that Garden City area, and there's some awesome apartments going up at the moment. I'd love to see some more of that product coming to market as well.
Yeah, around the shopping centres.
Centres in that kind of corridor between Canning Bridge and Garden City. There's a couple of little ones popping up just off the main road. So I think that's the cool type of product that I'd love to see us doing. But I think that takes consistency, and I think a residential builder is a different type of builder to an apartment. You know, there's a lot more involved in an apartment. There's a lot more legality, regulation, and it's a different type of build. So we need to build that capacity back into our building environment. We lost Jackson, Pindan, ProBuild, and a few of those through COVID. We need to get some of those people back into the market and delivering that type of product. I'm pretty bullish that the economy is pretty good for the next sort of 5 to 10 years. That's a good sign to say that the housing industry is going to be pretty consistent. And hopefully we've got a lot of good builders who are building lots of different type of product, lots of people co-living, looking at different ways of how they're going to live their life and being able to supply that type of product to where they want to live.
Beautiful. Michael, thank you again for coming back on the podcast, and let's do it again in 2027 and see where we're at. Hey?
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Thanks
again.
for having me.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you can stay up to date with all cash flow positive property updates.